What order you should watch Star Trek, the original series in, release order V's. Production order explained. When Star Trek, the original series first aired in 1966, no one could have predicted it would launch one of the most influential franchises in science fiction history. But as beloved as Captain Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy became, there's always been one nagging question for fans. What's the best order to watch the show in? Should you stick to the release order, the way audiences experienced it in the 1960s, or go with the production order, the sequence the creators intended when filming the episodes? This debate has been going on for decades, and both viewing paths have strong arguments behind them. Understanding the difference and how each order affects your experience of the series sheds light on the peculiar history of how Star Trek was made, why it sometimes feels inconsistent, and how best to approach it as a modern viewer. The two orders explained. Before diving into the pros and cons, it's important to define what we mean by release order and production order. Release order, broadcast order. This is the order NBC aired the episodes between 1966 and 1969. Audiences in the 1960s saw the show unfold this way, starting with The Man Trap as the premiere. Production order. This is the order in which the episodes were actually filmed. From the perspective of the cast and crew, the story begins with the unaired pilot The Cage, moves into the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, and continues onward. These two orders don't line up. NBC made decisions about which episodes to air first based on marketing strategies, perceived audience appeal, and sometimes even budget considerations, not narrative logic. How release order can confuse new viewers. For a modern audience, watching Star Trek in release order can sometimes feel a little jarring. Characters' personalities shift dramatically between episodes, costumes and sets change unexpectedly, and key relationships seem inconsistent. For example, Spock's behavior. Early in the release order, Spock doesn't resemble the calm, logical Vulcan we know. In The Man Trap and Charlie X, he behaves with more emotion, even raising his voice or smiling, echoes of his characterization from The Cage. Captain Kirk's development. In Where No Man Has Gone Before, Kirk struggles with philosophical dilemmas and the limits of command. But this episode didn't air until later in Season 1, meaning audiences first met a more polished, confident Kirk without the background of how he got there. Crew assignments. Dr. McCoy, Uhura, Sulu, and Scotty don't appear consistently in early release order episodes, making it seem like the ship's senior staff was still unsettled. In short, watching the release order gives you the authentic 1960s TV experience, but it doesn't always reflect the show's creative progression. Why production order feels more natural. Production order gives a smoother sense of character development and technological continuity. Since episodes were filmed sequentially with some minor exceptions, production order lets you see how the series evolved behind the scenes. Highlights of watching in production order include: Spock's evolution feels intentional. You see Leonard Nimoy gradually fine-tune Spock's stoic demeanor and Vulcan philosophy, rather than bouncing back and forth between emotional and logical versions of the character. Where No Man Has Gone Before as a true beginning, this second pilot introduces the refined vision of Star Trek, establishing Kirk as captain and setting the tone for future episodes. Watching it before jumping into the rest of Season 1 makes narrative sense. Consistency in uniforms and sets. You'll notice a natural progression in costume design, bridge lighting, and props instead of the odd fluctuations that come with release order. Production order is arguably the better choice for newcomers who want a coherent story without the rough edges of NBC's scheduling choices. The strange case of the pilots. One of the trickiest parts of deciding an order is figuring out where to place the pilots. The Cage, 1964. The original pilot, starring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike, was rejected by NBC for being too cerebral. It wasn't aired in full until 1988, though parts of it were reused in the Season 1 two-parter, The Menagerie. Today, most fans watch it as a prologue to the series. Where No Man Has Gone Before, 1965. The second pilot introduced William Shatner as Kirk and was much closer to the show we know. In production order, it's the first real episode. In release order, however, NBC held it back until the third broadcast episode. For a modern viewer, it makes sense to start with The Cage for historical context and then immediately watch Where No Man Has Gone Before as the true kickoff. Release order. The argument for nostalgia. Of course, there's a strong case for watching Star Trek in release order. For one, it's how fans in the 1960s first experienced the show. If you want to step into the shoes of the original audience, this is the authentic path. Additionally, some of NBC's choices actually work to the show's advantage. The Man Trap, as the premiere, NBC chose this monster of the week story to launch the series, believing audiences would be hooked by its horror elements. While not the most Star Trek-like story, it did capture attention and gave viewers a taste of the strange new worlds to come. Variety of tones. Release order mixes lighter episodes with darker ones, giving the show a less predictable rhythm. You might get a tense morality tale one week and a campy adventure the next, keeping things fresh. Watching in release order also means you're seeing the series as it was broadcast during its cultural moment, complete with all the quirks and inconsistencies. Production order. The argument for storytelling. On the other hand, production order appeals to viewers who care more about narrative flow and consistency than historical authenticity. This order makes it easier to track character arcs. Kirk as a developing leader, you witness his transition from a relatively new captain facing tough moral choices into the confident, decisive figure fans admire. Spock's logic as a defining trait. Instead of seeing him jump back and forth between emotional and unemotional portrayals, you follow his gradual refinement into the Spock we know today. Supporting crew becoming family. Uhura, Scotty, and McCoy settle into their roles more smoothly in production order, without the odd absences or sudden introductions that occur in release order. For viewers approaching Star Trek as a piece of storytelling rather than cultural history, production order is usually the more satisfying experience. So, which order should you choose? Ultimately, the best order depends on what kind of experience you want. Choose release order if you want to see the show as audiences did in the 1960s, quirks and all. This path highlights the cultural impact of Star Trek as it unfolded in real time. Choose production order if you want a smoother story with clearer character progression and fewer continuity hiccups. This path highlights the artistic intentions of the creators and the internal logic of the series. For many fans, the ideal approach is a hybrid. 1. Watch The Cage first as a prologue. 2. Follow with Where No Man Has Gone Before. 3. Continue with the production order for Season 1. 4. After that, you can choose to stick with production order or switch to release order for the authentic 60s experience. The legacy of the debate. This question, release order versus production order, isn't unique to Star Trek. Other classic series like Firefly, Doctor Who, and even animated shows have faced similar dilemmas when networks shuffled episode orders for broadcast.